So this was actually supposed to be part of my video on the Company of Wolves, but I think I accidentally deleted the section on symbols and motifs. So I thought I'd just quickly upload this as a short supplementary video. As with every Angela Carter story, the Company of Wolves is layered with symbols and motifs that add depth to the themes and the messages of the story. So I'm going to quickly go through a few of those with you. The first symbolic element I want to discuss is the wolf who is also man, in other words, werewolves or lycanthropes. As I mentioned in the original video in the discussion of primal nature, wolves in the story are very often described in visceral, threatening sort of terms: carnivore incarnate, ferocious, cunning. There's lots of imagery of them on the hunt. We're told all about the danger that they pose. They're predators. But we also see them in their human disguise, for lack of a better word, where they are able to appear mostly normal. And what we end up with is imagery that blurs the line between man and beast, which reinforces the werewolf as a metaphor for male sexual aggression, but more than that, the danger of repressed desire. What happens to the girl in the story suggests that the real danger to women is not actually monsters, but by showing the werewolf's ability to disguise this predatory nature behind an outward display of civility. She meets him in his human form. She's attracted to him in his human form. The story suggests that the true danger lies in men who conceal their true nature, who are repressing their destructive desires in order to lure in their prey. That's where the real danger lies. And as I mentioned in the discussion of that primal nature, that is only one aspect of them. They are also self-aware creatures who we can feel empathy and pity for. They're aggressive, dangerous beings, but it would be incorrect to label them just as representative of evil and danger. They are far more complex than that. Next, we have blood, which is a recurring motif in the story that is multifaceted. There are a few symbolic aspects to this, including the link to violence and death, which we see in the wolf attacks. Blood is the inevitable result of the wolf's predatory instincts. We have this constant imagery of wolves ripping prey apart, which establishes blood as the sign of carnal violence and the destructive side of nature. When the hunter arrives at Grandma's house, we see there's blood on his chin. More overtly, though, blood and the color red in this story is directly tied to menstruation and the girl's passage into womanhood. Carter actually spells this one out for us by describing how the red color of her shawl looks like blood, and then the very next sentence she talks about her growing breasts and the fact that she's just started her woman's bleeding. The final symbolic element I want to talk about is the Bible, which may seem a bit strange because it might seem fairly insignificant in the story. After all, it's only mentioned twice. The Bible represents the traditional Christian and, by extension, patriarchal system of values that seeks to regulate female sexuality and behavior. In this story, it functions as a symbol of patriarchal religion and moral authority. When we first told about her grandma on page 135, we're told she has her Bible for company. She is a pious old woman. And when the wolf knocks on the door, the narrator says, "You can hurl your Bible at him and your apron after, Granny. You thought that it was a sure prophylactic against these infernal vermin. Now call on Christ and his mother and all the angels in heaven to protect you, but it won't do you any good." A prophylactic is a preventative measure. It's medicine or a course of action to prevent something. This shows the villagers' reliance on their Christian faith as a kind of talisman against the evils of the supernatural world. And I do look at the idea of the werewolf as a supernatural being in more detail in the Company of Wolves video. If you haven't watched that, please go back and watch that. So it's a talisman against the evils of the supernatural world, as well as protection against evils of the flesh, so sexual transgressions. And this reliance is mocked in a bit of a blasphemous way when the narrator says you can call on Christ, but it won't do you any good. It doesn't stop the wolf from eating Grandma, and it doesn't stop the seduction that happens after. In Carter's revisionist fairy tale world, that moral authority is powerless. That old religious order cannot defend against or contain natural bodily desires. When the wolf devours Granny, regardless, Carter's making a statement about the futility of relying on rigid moral codes or pious symbols to navigate a world that is driven by instinct and desire. What's noteworthy is that when the girl arrives at her grandmother's house, it says on page 137, "For the first time she'd seen it so, the Bible lay closed on the table." Now, her grandma always had it open, and that's one of the visual clues for her that something is amiss. But it goes deeper than that. The Bible being closed is a very effective visual metaphor. Carter uses that image to mark the end of the old order, the collapse of the moral, religious, patriarchal authority that the grandmother represented. A closed Bible suggests that the teaching and rules and morals boundaries it once upheld are no longer active or relevant to the girl. While Granny clings to the old world of the religious fear and superstition, the young heroine embraces her own sexuality, rejecting those inherited restrictions. In essence, in this story, the Bible symbolizes the old patriarchal world that insists on female purity and innocence, and when it's silenced or closed, we see the liberating force of the girl's feminine agency as she embraces her carnal desires and that primal nature I talked about. Her life is no longer dictated by the do not stray from the path cautionary tales. This departure from the Bible and the Christian faith is reinforced at the end of the story with that reference to Christmas as the werewolf's birthday. If you haven't already, please go back and watch that video for more in-depth analysis of the story. I hope this video has been helpful to you.